A grizzled, 60-year-old Steven Seagal, his beard more salt than pepper, was polishing an heirloom saddle when the quiet of Cedar Hollow Ranch was broken. Out front, his 76-year-old Aunt Clara trimmed rosemary, her hands gentle, her spirit as tough as the ancient oaks shading the porch. She was a picture of peace against the rolling hills. Then a mud-splattered Ford Interceptor rolled up the gravel drive, and a deputy with poison in his eyes stepped out. A forgotten grudge had just arrived, but he didn't know the legend inside. Before I show you exactly how a forgotten insult led to a life-or-death struggle, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. The morning sun was warm on Clara's face as she greeted the officer. The air at Cedar Hollow Ranch that morning was pure and still, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. It was a sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow down, managed by the steady hands of Clara, Steven's aunt. She wasn't his mother, but she had been the unwavering matriarch of the land since his parents passed, her connection to it running as deep as the roots of the cedar trees that gave the ranch its name. Her face, a roadmap of laughter and hard work, was framed by a cascade of silver hair. This morning, she hummed a forgotten tune, her shears snipping rhythmically at the rosemary bushes that lined the walkway, releasing their sharp, clean fragrance into the air. Inside the quiet coolness of the stables, Steven Seagal worked with a focused calm. He wasn't a movie star here. He was just a man reconnecting with his own history. The worn leather of the ancestral saddles felt familiar under his oilcloth. Each pass was a meditation, a way of honoring the generations that came before him. He'd returned to the ranch seeking this very silence, a respite from the noise of the world. The rhythmic creak of the leather and the soft snorts of the horses in their stalls were the only sounds he needed. He was a lion in repose, the formidable power he possessed dormant, wrapped in the tranquility of home. He had no idea that this peace was about to be irrevocably shattered. The crunch of tires on gravel was the first discordant note. Deputy Miller slammed the door of his Ford Interceptor, the sound unnaturally loud in the morning calm. He was a big man, gone to seed, with a bloated face and a swagger that couldn't quite conceal the bitterness in his eyes. He wore his uniform not as a symbol of service, but as a suit of armor for a weak ego. His name carried weight in the surrounding small towns, a weight felt mostly by those who couldn't fight back. He was a bully with a badge, protected by a network of favors and a well-placed relative in the department. His presence at Cedar Hollow wasn't official business. It was personal. Years ago, in a dingy roadside bar, a drunk and belligerent Miller had been harassing a young waitress. Steven, passing through town, had intervened. He hadn't thrown a punch or even raised his voice. He'd simply used a calm, cutting remark and a subtle shift of his weight that put Miller off balance, making him stumble into a table and look like a fool. The laughter of the other patrons had seared itself into Miller's memory. He'd been publicly emasculated by the quiet confidence of a man he knew he could never beat. The grudge had festered for years, a toxic rot in his soul. When he saw the Seagal Ranch on a list for a routine code check, he saw his chance. He approached Clara with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, ma'am. Deputy Miller. We got a report about some damaged fencing near your property line. Figured I'd come take a look myself." Clara stood, brushing dirt from her canvas gloves. Her gaze was clear and direct. "Fencing? It all seemed fine yesterday, but you're welcome to check, officer. Would you like me to get my nephew? He's just down at the stables." Miller's smile tightened. "That won't be necessary. It's just a quick look. The report said it was out back, near the old paddock by the tree line. Why don't you walk me back there? You can show me the boundary." A flicker of unease went through Clara. It was a strange request, but he was a lawman. She nodded slowly. "All right then. Follow me." She led him away from the house, her sturdy boots making soft sounds in the grass. As they walked toward the far side of the barn, the familiar sounds of the ranch seemed to fade. The birds' song quieted. The gentle breeze died. There was only the sound of their footsteps and a growing, unnerving silence. A primal instinct, honed by a lifetime on the land, told her something was wrong. They had left the safety of the open yard and were now shielded from view by the large, weathered barn. The trap was set. They reached the edge of the property, where an old fence of wooden posts and barbed wire separated the paddock from a dense thicket of woods. A length of rusted barbed wire, sharp and menacing, lay coiled near a fence post like a sleeping viper. "Here we are," Miller grunted, his voice losing its fabricated politeness. He pointed at the loose wire. "See? Total code violation. A hazard." Clara frowned. "I can have someone out to fix that first thing tomorrow. It's just old wire." But as she looked up, she saw the pretense fall away from his face, replaced by a mask of raw, undisguised hatred. It was never about the wire. "You Seagals," he spat, the words dripping with venom. "Always thinking you're better than everyone. Your nephew made a fool of me. Laughed in my face. Did you think I'd forget that?" Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Clara's composure. She took a step back, her hand flying to her throat. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "You're mistaken. My nephew is right here. Let's go talk to him." "He can't help you now," Miller snarled, and he lunged. Before she could even draw breath to scream, he snatched the rusted barbed wire from the ground. In one brutal motion, he looped it over her head and around her neck. He pulled it tight, the barbs digging in her skin. He was grunting with the effort, his face contorted in a grotesque sneer as he forced her backward against the rough wood of the fence post. Clara's hands flew up, clawing desperately at the wire, her fingers scraping against the sharp points. A choked, gurgling sound was all she could manage. Her vision began to swim in black spots. "People like you," he hissed, his face inches from hers, his breath sour, "need to be taught a lesson about power." Back in the stables, Steven heard it. It wasn't loud. It was a faint, muffled thump against the barn wall, a sound that didn't belong in the morning symphony. It was followed by a desperate shuffle and a sound like a strangled cough. His hands stilled on the leather. Every instinct in his body screamed. He dropped the oilcloth and moved. He didn't run. He flowed, a current of silent, controlled urgency. He rounded the corner of the massive barn, just as his aunt's legs gave out from under her. He saw the scene in a horrifying, crystal-clear snapshot. Miller hunched over her, his fists clenched, pulling the wire taut, a murderous grimace on his face. For a fraction of a second, the world stood still. Then the lion awoke. A roar of pure, primal fury tore from Steven's throat. Miller spun around, his eyes wide with shock and sudden terror. He dropped the wire, but it was too late. Clara crumpled to the ground, her body convulsing as she desperately gasped for air, her face a terrifying shade of crimson, her neck laced with blood. Steven didn't hesitate. He didn't issue a warning. He was a projectile of righteous violence. Miller barely had time to raise his arms in a clumsy defense before Steven was on him. It wasn't a brawl. It was a dismantling. A precise, lightning-fast jab to the solar plexus drove the air from Miller's lungs, doubling him over. A follow-up strike, a hard knuckle to the bridge of his nose, produced a sickening crunch and a spray of blood. As Miller staggered backward, an elbow strike to his temple sent him crashing into the very fence post where he'd just pinned Clara. Steven grabbed the front of Miller's uniform, hauling the dazed man to his feet. His voice was a low, terrifying growl, more vibration than sound. "You touched my aunt." Miller's mouth bubbled with blood. She resisted. Another punch, a short, brutal jab, silenced him. Steven didn't want to kill him, but every fiber of his being screamed for retribution. He was a storm of controlled chaos, ready to break the man apart. Only one thing stopped him. "Steven, stop." The voice was a weak, rasping whisper from the ground. He turned. His aunt was alive, bruised, bleeding, but alive. And her strength, even now, was enough to pull him back from the brink. He released Miller, who collapsed into a whimpering, broken pile on the dirt. Steven was instantly at Clara's side, his rage vanishing, replaced by a wave of gentle concern. "It's okay now, Aunt Clara. I'm here." She nodded, tears of pain and relief tracing paths through the dust on her cheeks. He tried. "I know," Steven whispered, his own hands trembling with the receding adrenaline. and he's going to pay. Steven rose slowly, turning back to the crumpled form of Deputy Miller. The look in his eyes had transformed from the hot rage of a fighter to the cold, unforgiving calm of an executioner. Miller, seeing that look, scrambled backward on the ground, crab walking away like a terrified insect. He was a bully who had just picked a fight with a dragon, and he knew it. He didn't see that Steven still held the bloodied length of barbed wire in his hand, a grim testament to the crime. Clara's breathing was a shallow, painful rasp. Her face, usually so vibrant, was a deathly pale. Steven didn't blink. He closed the distance between him and Miller in 2 silent, predatory strides. Miller, in a panic, fumbled for the service weapon on his hip, his last resort. He never got there. Crack! Steven's open palm struck the side of Miller's wrist with the force and precision of a blacksmith's hammer. The firearm flew from the deputy's numb fingers, spinning through the air and burying itself in a nearby pile of old hay. Miller cried out in pain, but the sound was cut short as Steven's knee drove deep into his gut, folding him in half. The deputy staggered back, gasping for breath, bent over in agony. Steven followed with a powerful kick to the chest that launched him backward across the dirt, where he collided with a heavy wooden support beam and slid to the ground, a heap of broken authority. Steven immediately turned back to his aunt, the violence compartmentalized and dismissed. "Clara," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "I'm here. Just breathe. I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open. A faint wheeze escaped her lips as she fought for every breath. He gently worked the barbed wire away from her neck, his large hands surprisingly delicate as he cradled her head. "You're gonna be okay. You're safe now." Her lips trembled, forming his name without a sound. Behind them, a groan. Miller was trying to push himself up. Steven laid his aunt's head gently on a clean patch of grass and rose to his full height. The transformation was complete. This was not the movie star, not the nephew. This was the warrior. Miller, dazed but defiant, managed to get to his feet, blood dripping from his nose and lip. "You just assaulted a law enforcement officer," he spat, clinging to the only power he had left. "You're finished, Seagal. You're dead." Steven didn't reply with words. He replied with motion. Miller threw a wild, telegraph punch. Steven evaded it effortlessly, and the counterattack was instantaneous. Crack! His elbow connected with the side of Miller's jaw. In the same fluid motion, he seized the man's arm, twisting it into a devastating wrist lock that forced the larger man to his knees with a scream of agony as bones and ligaments were pushed beyond their limits. "You think this badge gives you power?" Steven growled, applying more pressure. "You think strangling a 76-year-old woman makes you a man?" Snap! Miller shrieked as his arm broke. Steven released him, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The deputy, now dragging his useless arm, tried to crawl toward his fallen taser. Steven kicked it far out of reach, then knelt beside him, eye to eye. "You picked the wrong family on the wrong day at the wrong ranch," Steven said, his voice deadly calm. He stood, walked over to the barn wall, and returned with a length of rope used for saddling. With brutal efficiency, he bound Miller's wrists behind his back, securing him to the support beam. "You'll wait for the real sheriff here," Steven stated, "and you will tell them exactly what you did." Miller spat a glob of blood onto the dirt. "I'll tell them you attacked me," he hissed through broken teeth. "They'll believe me. They always do." Steven leaned in close one last time. "Everyone in this valley knows my aunt. No one knows you." He stood up and pointed toward a dark corner under the barn's eaves. A single, small red light blinked softly in the shadows. "A security camera. I wired this whole place myself last year. Every word, every second. It's all on tape." Miller's face fell. The arrogance, the defiance, all of it evaporated, replaced by the hollow look of a man who was utterly and completely finished. He knew it. The game was over. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. 2 county sheriff vehicles sped down the long gravel road, kicking up clouds of dust, and screeched to a halt near the barn. Deputy Hayes, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face who had known the Seagal family for decades, was the first one out. He rushed in, his gun drawn, and stopped dead, his eyes widening at the scene of carnage. "Steven? What in God's name happened here?" Steven, who was now gently helping his aunt to her feet, simply pointed with his chin toward the bound and broken figure of Deputy Miller. "You've got a rogue deputy, Bill. He tried to strangle my Aunt Clara with that barbed wire." Hayes's jaw tightened, his gaze shifting from the blood on Clara's neck to the whimpering Miller, then back to Steven. "He did what?" "Footage is on the camera," Steven said, his voice flat and hard as stone. "I want charges filed. I want everything you've got." "You'll get it," Hayes promised grimly. As the other officers took a shocked and sputtering Miller into custody, cuffing him and hauling his broken body away, Steven carefully lifted his aunt into his arms and carried her toward the familiar comfort of the farmhouse porch. She was fully conscious now, her tough spirit already fighting back. Her hand found his and squeezed it. "I'm sorry, Clara," Steven said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have been there sooner." She managed a weak, watery smile. "Nonsense. You were right on time." She paused, then added, her voice regaining a spark of its usual fire, but not a moment to spare. The news spread like wildfire. By the time Clara had been checked, treated, and released from the county clinic, insisting she was fine to go home, the story was already headlining local news sites. Deputy accused of attempted murder on action stars aunt. Back at the sheriff's office, Sheriff Dalton, a man built like a barrel with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, slammed the interrogation room door. Miller sat cuffed to the table, his broken arm in a sling, his face a swollen mess. The arrogant glint, however, was trying to return to his eyes. "You can only talk to my union rep, or are we just going to sit here?" Dalton leaned over the table, his shadow covering Miller. "You're going to shut up. You strangled an unarmed 76-year-old woman, then got your spine handed to you by her nephew. There is no union rep for that." He tossed a USB drive onto the metal table. It skittered to a halt in front of Miller. "Security footage. High definition. We have you on tape, Miller. Gloating. Threatening. Trying to kill her. You are a disgrace to this badge, and you're going to prison for a very, very long time." The court hearing 2 weeks later was a formality. The video was played for a silent, horrified courtroom. The prosecutor didn't need to build a case. Miller had built it for him. When it was his time to speak, Steven stood, his presence filling the room. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He looked directly at the judge. That man used his authority to lure my aunt to a secluded spot. He wrapped rusted wire around her throat and told her she was going to die. If I had arrived 1 minute later, she would be gone. This wasn't law enforcement. This was cowardice. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. He doesn't deserve mercy. He deserves a cage. The sentence was swift. 15 years, no possibility of parole. As they let a stunned Miller away in chains, his eyes met Steven's one last time. There was no triumph in Steven's gaze, only a cold, final promise. That evening, back at the ranch, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, Steven watched his aunt tending to her garden, her movements a little stiffer, but her spirit unbroken. Peace had returned to Cedar Hollow. But it was a peace that now carried a clear, unspoken warning. Never, ever threaten Steven Seagal's family. This wasn't just about a fight in a barn. It was about the primal line that exists to protect family. It's a reminder that true strength isn't found in a badge or a uniform, but in the fierce, unwavering courage to defend the ones you love. When cowardice hides behind authority, it eventually confronts a force of nature it cannot comprehend, and the scales of justice are balanced not by procedure, but by principle. Have you ever witnessed someone abusing their power and felt completely helpless to stop them? What would you have done if you had stumbled upon that scene at the barn seconds before Steven arrived? Do you believe that there are moments when taking direct, physical action is the only path to true justice, or should one always rely on the system, even when it's flawed? We want to hear your thoughts on this complex moral crossroad in the comments below. If this story reminded you of the unbreakable bond of family, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about justice, protection, and unexpected heroes. Share this with someone who you know would do anything to protect their loved ones. We appreciate every single one of you, and we read every comment. Your voice is a vital part of our community, so let it be heard. More stories about everyday heroes and villains getting what they deserve are waiting on your screen right now. Click on one of those next, and we'll see you in the next video with another story that will make you question everything. Stay safe out there, and remember to look out for each other. We'll be back tomorrow with another incredible true story.